discussion about benefactors. One thing that is difficult is that a lot of deaf people consider benefactors, or the hearing population in general, to be perfect. And that's true not just of the deaf population, but of any minority towards a majority group. It's this love-hate relationship at times. And one of the reasons, and that's not always the case, but let me give you an example of where that's the case. Deaf people, well, let me back up. Interpreters, we don't always have time to show all the mistakes people make. If somebody is just blowing through a speech, I'm just barely trying to get at the bare bones minimum of the interpretation to get across to the deaf person what the point of the message was, right? Sometimes, however, though, that means that I'm omitting certain things for the sake of time. You know, I may not have time to let you know that the AC is really loud and that the guy in the back is coughing and that other things like that are happening. And one of the things that sometimes get omitted in the sake of time is mistakes. If the hearing person is making mistakes in their speech or stuttering or other types of things, I try as best as I can to let the deaf person know that. However, there are times, and you guys will realize this as interpreters, where there's just not enough time. You're really just trying to get the bare bones message out, and that is all you have time to do. The problem that lies within that is that they never see hearing people making mistakes in their speech. So especially like in a speech class, they don't hear all of the uhs and ums, and if we're not in some way demonstrating that to them or showing the nervousness or showing all of those cues, those verbal cues, they may consider it to be that hearing people don't have a hard time with speech. Hearing people, and I don't mean speech as in oralism, I mean speeches as in like I'm giving a presentation type speech. They might think that a hearing person never stumbles over their words. They may think all kinds of crazy things. And it's honestly our fault as interpreters, to a certain extent at least, just because we are not conveying those mistakes or miscues to the deaf people. And that can happen the opposite way too. I have to be very careful when I'm making my own verbal mistakes in English that the hearing person doesn't think that it's the deaf person that's making that mistake. The same also goes for example, in a speech class, I have to be very careful, again, going the other way. When it's the deaf person's time to get up and do their speech, I usually will ask the deaf person, and I know it seems unfair, but I'll usually ask them for their own benefit. If you have a copy of your speech ahead of time, I can prep it. I can look over it. I can make sure that I'm using your exact vocabulary that you want me to use when I'm voicing your speech. Very often I will also meet one-on-one with the speech professor and explain to them, well, first of all, I'll ask them, what are some of the goals that you're looking for from this speech? And then I'll also ask them to let me maybe review my own work if they're videotaping it or something to that extent, and let them know how many of those uhs and ums were me, the interpreter, and how many I really feel were based on what this student presented. So it's a lot of extra work on my part, but I feel like it's just fair to ensure that what's happening in that classroom is effective and fair to the deaf student amongst all of their peers. So anyway, that's definitely something to consider. Something else your book discusses, and the PowerPoint discusses, is horizontal hostility. It talks about a lot of different types of issues that come from oppression, but horizontal hostility, you see this in some communities, and the deaf community is one of them, where it's the crab theory, as your book puts it. You know, they don't even want to see each other succeed. It's like they think that I'm limited to or relegated to this position in society, and so I don't want to see anybody else succeed either. And if you do succeed, then you're not really one of us. It's this horrible, it's just horizontal hostility. It's we're on the same level, and I don't want you to get above that level because I'm not going to attain that status, and so I don't want you to either. And so socially, I'm going to oppress you, and I'm going to keep you down. It happens. Oddly enough, you'll also see deaf people who will still be xenophobic, will still, which is a fear of the unknown or a stranger or somebody who's unlike you, basically. You know, you will still see them try to oppress other groups, unfortunately. And I've seen this happen, and I've had deaf friends who've admitted this to me in confidence, just telling me, it's the funniest thing, but I noticed the other day that I saw somebody who was deaf-blind, and I didn't want to have a conversation with them. It was just too weird. It was too awkward. It was too this or too that, and they realized I'm doing exactly to them what other people do to me, you know, and I just blind guy, and the deaf guy was listening to a story the blind guy was telling him, and the deaf guy signed this, which, as an interpreter, usually I voice as, oh, I see. And the deaf person knows that's usually how we voice that. And so, as I voiced that, the blind guy was sharp as a tack, and he was like, oh, I hear. And so, I couldn't hold it in. I'm really bad. I should have. You're supposed to interpret before you yourself start laughing, but I started laughing, and I looked at my deaf friend, and I told him what the blind guy had said, and he just started cracking up. It was hilarious. So, at least they could laugh about it. I thought that was funny. Let's see. Also, it's important to know your own privilege, and the book discusses this as well. Just don't deny the fact, if you're in a privileged state, that you have that sort of privilege, whether it's your status, whether it's your socioeconomic status, whether it's your, I don't know, anything, your position in society, whatever it may be. Just don't deny it. Be aware of it. Whether you take it to mean you truly are privileged, I'm not saying that you feel privileged. I definitely do not. But I have to realize that people, when they look at me, may assume that about me. And so I have to recognize that. Whether it's true or not, I have to recognize that other people may assume that about me. And the same is true also of our consumers. What are they assuming about each other? What are they assuming about me? As interpreters, we have to be careful. I keep saying that, but it's true. We have to be careful not to align ourselves with either client. And so, for example, if I think about this, if I'm walking down the hall at a doctor's appointment, should I walk along with the deaf person or should I walk along with the doctor? Because I guarantee you that one way or the other, it looks like I'm aligning myself with one or the other. I don't know. Sometimes I just try to kind of walk in between. And if the doctor is talking to me, I'll at least sign what's being said so that the deaf person can also interject. It's hard. Because you don't want to be rude to either client, and yet it's difficult. Something else about that is, I try very hard to ensure that if I'm around a deaf person, that I do not teach sign language. If I'm around the deaf person, sometimes I'll show the sign that I know, but I'm always kind of looking at the deaf person like, right, or what do you think? Because it's not my language, it's their language. Be very careful if you ever go to interpret in deaf community classes or sign language classes or those kinds of things, that if students come up to you and ask, what's the sign for blah, 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 that you do not say, oh, this. Ask the deaf person. And they may say, no, I'm asking you. It doesn't matter. Oh, well, let's ask the deaf professor, because I don't want to tell you wrong, and I don't want to tell you what I would do if that's not what they're going to teach you. The only exception to that is when I do have some deaf friends who, the hearing persons wanted to surprise them by telling them happy birthday or something like that. Well, I'm not going to look at the deaf person and go, how did you sign happy birthday? That's the other thing. Usually I'll spell it to them so that the hearing person's not seeing me sign it. But, if they're wanting to do something nice like that and surprise the deaf person,